mother, she was determined to make it.
I think her drive was for her son. He was her world.
But an unexpected tragedy cut her young life short.
I think she was literally fighting for her life.
She's running from someone who's clearly deranged.
They had to walk up, kneel next to her, and execute her. 2 shots to make sure. That's cold.
In the days that follow, startling allegations bubbled to the surface.
She had told me that he had cheated on her with a stripper.
And as the leads close to home dry up, a stunning twist reveals a predator no one saw coming.
This person was wearing a blue Parker, dark sunglasses, and gloves, coming up to the ATM and using the ATM. I was like, who the hell is this?
To catch a killer, police would have to sort through a treasure trove of evidence.
It was clear that she had a bad temper and that she just lost it.
This person has the hallmarks of a deranged, cold-blooded killer.
October 13th, 2004, Santa Fe, New Mexico. On a fall afternoon, a disturbing 911 call comes through the Santa Fe Police Department.
Please send somebody help me. What's going on? They killed him. He's right on the floor dead. Is he breathing? She's dead. Oh, how old is she? She's 18. Oh, my God.
Responding officers did arrive at that scene, and the initial contact by our responding officers was with Ursula Duran's mother. She was, again, extremely upset.
As we entered the residence, it appeared to be neat and orderly. We were directed to the living area where we discovered the body of Ursula Duran. She was laying on her back, deceased, and what appeared to be several gunshot wounds.
Outside the home, police try and console the witnesses who found Ursula's lifeless body.
There was a boyfriend present and the mother, both of whom were visibly shaken and extremely emotional.
Those people were identified as Elaine Duran, which was Ursula's mother, and Thomas Lujan.
Thomas Lujan was the father of Ursula's child. She was the mother of a 2-year-old named Isaiah.
Born in 1985, Ursula Duran was raised in Nambe, New Mexico, a small community just north of Santa Fe.
Ursula did have a big family. She has 2 sisters, a brother. Her family was very close.
As Ursula entered high school and blossomed into a young woman, she caught the eye of an older boy named Thomas Lujan.
Thomas was 5 or 6 years older than Ursula. She would sneak out, he would pick her up, and they'd go, hang out or party.
But what seemed like a carefree and fun time turned serious when Ursula discovered she was pregnant at just 16 years old. When Thomas found out he was going to be a father, he promised to stay by Ursula's side. In 2001, they welcomed their beautiful son Isaiah into the world.
Ursula was a devoted mother. She looked upon her child as the center of her universe. She would do anything, whatever it took, to make life successful for him and for herself as the mom.
With the support of Thomas and her family, Ursula continued her education and received a helping hand from a local program.
I was part of the staff of the Teen Parent Center. It was a program for pregnant and parenting teens who were attending high school. Ursula came in right after her baby was born in her junior year. She was very self-assured. She knew what she wanted. She knew what she had to do.
She was definitely the one that pushed me. Ursula would always tell me, we're not going to become a number. We're going to pass this, and we're going to prove everyone wrong. And I think her drive was for her son. He was her world.
In 2003, she began to work full-time for her parents' successful business and enrolled in college at the University of New Mexico.
She seemed like she really had her life together and was really, really trying on behalf of her son to, make a life and find her way, in the community.
2 years after having her son, on October 13th, 2004, Ursula's shining light was forever darkened when she was tragically found shot to death inside a Santa Fe home.
Mrs. Duran explained to us that this location was Ursula's aunt and uncle's house. So Ursula was house sitting at this address for her aunt and uncle and staying there with the baby.
Thankfully, Isaiah was only just picked up from daycare by Elaine Duran and Thomas Lujan before arriving at the house. Detectives speak with Ursula's mother to get a better understanding of the timeline leading up to the discovery of her 19-year-old daughter's body.
Thomas had talked to her on the afternoon of the 13th. Thomas said that he had lunch with Ursula and that Ursula left his home to go to the Calle Cacique address to fold laundry. Ms. Duran stated that she had been trying to get a hold of Ursula, throughout the afternoon, but Ursula wasn't responding. That Thomas had called looking for Ursula sometime around 4:30ish.
Thomas went to the house after he got off of work at 4:30 and knocked on the door. Nobody answered. He looked in the windows. He didn't see anything.
Thomas had called Elaine back saying he still can't find her and that he was going to the daycare center to pick up their young son, Isaiah. Elaine went with him, met him there. They picked up Isaiah, and then they both went back to the Calle Cacique address looking for Ursula. When they got to the house, she had gone around the back of the house. Thomas stayed at the front door initially, but then started following her. When they got to the back of the house, the window was broken. Thomas climbed in. That's when he found Ursula.
After speaking to Ursula's mother and the father of her young son, Thomas Lujan, investigators step back inside the home and take in the tragic scene.
The rear door to the residence, there was a window. It had glass window panes, and one of them opened up into what was like a sunroom.
The evidence certainly appears to point to the fact that there was a chase through the home.
There was some laundry on the floor. It appeared that Ursula was trying to flee when she was shot. Bullet wounds in the wrist and the lower back, we believe, caused her to fall to the ground, where the remaining rounds were used to end Ursula's life.
There was some confrontation, some physical confrontation that happened prior to any gunshots. Ursula was shot a total of 5 times.
2 of which appear to be fired at point-blank range as the killer stood right over her as she lay on the ground.
Those were significant in that one was in close proximity, possibly inches away from her chest.
Why was Ursula shot and killed inside this house? There was no clear indication of who the assailant was. Interviews needed to be conducted, leads developed and followed through to find out who did this.
Coming up, as the investigation heats up, new clues bring new questions.
Major items were not missing, so this appeared to be directed at Ursula.
There was what appeared to be a bouquet of pink flowers that had been crushed on the pavement.
That led them to think there may have been a romantic potential tie to her death.
October 13th, 2004, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Detectives are investigating the shooting death of 19-year-old mother Ursula Duran. At the time of her murder, Ursula had been house-sitting for her aunt and uncle.
It was in a solidly, middle class to upper middle class neighborhood. It wasn't on, the sort of rougher side of town. So it was unique in that sense.
An initial search of the scene suggests Ursula's killer may not have been motivated by money.
Major items that burglars would normally remove from a house were not missing, so this appeared to be directed at Ursula.
There were only two that whoever did this took the time to look for and pick up shell casings in an effort to hide evidence or conceal what may have happened.
Investigators soon discover something else.
A single hair was found on Ursula's, in her hand.
The hair found in Miss Duran's hand, we presume, was taken from the attacker as she tried to defend herself from what happened. And it was sent for testing with the crime lab.
It's outside the home where investigators find another potentially game-changing clue.
I noticed that there was a tire impression in the driveway that didn't seem to match the other ones. It was distinctive in that it had a center line running down through it and then, swooping grooves.
Another clue found near the tire tracks seems to support the theory that Ursula knew her murderer.
At the edge of the roadway, there was what appeared to be a bouquet of pink flowers that had been crushed on the pavement.
That led them to think there may have been a romantic potential tie to her death.
Is there a possibility that there was a fight and it escalated to the point where she was shot?
At this time, the point in the investigation, there was no thoughts of this is an unknown killer, someone unknown to the victim. This isn't some serial killer. This isn't a robbery. Somebody broke into the wrong house. We've just got to figure out who it is.
With a wealth of clues recovered at the crime scene, detectives circle back to Elaine Duran to see if they can find out some more details about Ursula's personal life.
Mrs. Duran explained to us that Ursula had been dating Thomas Lujan. They were a boyfriend and girlfriend. However, Ursula had recently moved back home.
Elaine points out that Thomas wasn't the only man in her life causing her distress.
Elaine brought up this young man Ursula had to get rude with. She really wanted him to stop calling her, but that's really it.
Though she can't go into further details about the young man, there's another part of Elaine's statement that jumps out to investigators.
She had spoken with Ursula earlier in the day, and Elaine knew that Ursula was going to have lunch with Thomas.
That was the last contact anybody ever had with Ursula.
We absolutely can't rule out Thomas, the boyfriend, and we asked him to come to the station.
Following their interview is whereabouts.
A couple of follow-up questions, man. Could you just recap your day real quick again?
So we ate our lunch about 1 o'clock, 1:05, something around there. So she ended up leaving a little bit early, and then got to work about 1:25. She wasn't answering her phone. I tried her a few times, and then usually she's real good about answering it. So I called to her office just to see if she'd been back over there and come on to my number. Couldn't find her in her office when she answered the phone. Finally, about 4:30, I got off and I went to my apartment. So it really started to worry me, man.
With Thomas's story matching his earlier account, detectives then ask how serious the arguments between him and Ursula had become.
We got into his history with Ursula, pretty much told him, you had to have known that we would find out about that, Tom. He goes, no, I know.
According to Thomas, the alleged incidents were a two-way street.
He did acknowledge the domestic incidences involving himself and Ursula. And I believe he said, yeah, some of them were my fault, but some of them weren't. And it was difficult with the child, and there was a lot of stress.
It was good as far as I knew. We were doing good. Like I say, as far as I knew, we were on a good... trying to start over, like I say, start our life over again.
Ursula had recently moved back home. She was living at home, but she wanted to work things out with Thomas.
As their conversation continues, investigators begin to turn up the heat.
A burglar didn't come in and shoot her 5 times.
5 times?
5 times. This is anger. It's somebody who lost control. Okay, people understand that, losing control.
You got crime of passion versus premeditation. Okay?
Why would I kill her? She's the mother of my son. She's my only reason for living.
Without any evidence connecting Thomas to the murder, detectives allowed Thomas Lujan to walk.
I recall telling my supervisor, I'm not willing to eliminate Lujan at this time. I still believe there's a possibility he may have had something to do with it. The closest thing he came to a denial of killing Ursula Duran was, I would never do that. I loved her.
Coming up, as the hunt continues, detectives get a tip that may bring them closer to catching a killer.
They had a short-lived affair.
I know they went on a couple dates. At that time, Ramos had a really nice car.
The tire impressions on the Mitsubishi were the same marks that were in the driveway. Had the line down the middle, the same swooping marks. We were like, wow, does it get better than this?
October 14th, 2004. After finding Ursula Duran murdered inside her relative's home, investigators still have questions about the victim's longtime boyfriend, Thomas Lujan.
After the interview with Tom Lujan, I could not eliminate him as the person who killed Ursula Duran.
Over the next 24 hours, investigators continue their interviews with friends and family when they receive a tip that could be a game changer.
We received a phone call from a friend of Ursula, Lauren Aguilar. And Miss Aguilar began to share with us that Ursula had been seeing earlier in the summer a young man named Ramos Baldonado. She went on to explain that Ramos and Ursula kind of had a short-lived affair.
Ramos was a mutual friend, and I think Ursula must have shown some interest. I know they went on a couple dates. At that time, Ramos had a really nice car.
He had a Mitsubishi 3000 GT.
Lauren claims it wasn't Ramos's nice ride that brought the pair together, but her difficulties with Thomas.
I feel like I hooked up with Ramos just to get back at Thomas. It was a part of, their in and outs.
According to Lauren, Thomas knew about Ramos Baldonado.
Lauren says Ursula and Thomas eventually reconciled, leaving Ramos out in the cold.
Naturally, we had to talk to Ramos Baldonado. So we began researching where he might be working and where he lived.
When investigators arrive at Ramos's address, one detail jumps out to them.
We're walking up to the house. I think it was almost simultaneously that we were walking by the Mitsubishi 3000, And Detective Ortiz and I looked down and then looked back up at each other. And I immediately knew he was thinking the same thing that I was on the Mitsubishi, with the same marks that were in the driveway. Had the line down the middle, the same swooping marks. We were like, wow. Does it get better than this?
Now a top person of interest, Ramos agrees to an interview at the station and openly discusses his relationship with Ursula.
Basically, what we're here for is because of Ursula. She got killed. Your name came up as an acquaintance or a friend of hers.
It was over 2 months ago. I had been talking to her for a couple months. I'd say maybe 3 months ago or so. We had been talking, and then I guess she was with her boyfriend still and everything, and he found out.
When investigators bring up the tire tracks found at the crime scene that seem to match his car, Ramos is quick to deny any involvement in Ursula's death.
He denied, outright, seeing Ursula on the 13th. We questioned him about the tire impressions. He said, it's not mine, can't be me. I wasn't there. I was never there. And eventually, Ramos said, I would like a lawyer.
Detectives are still convinced that Ursula's murderer is one of the two men they have just interviewed.
We interviewed Thomas 2 or 3 different times. And each time got progressively more involved. And probably a little bit more accusatory because of everything that was pointing to Thomas. The only thing that didn't point to Thomas were the things that pointed to Ramos Baldonado.
But when investigators contact Ramos's friend, Joseph Montoya, he vouches for Ramos's timeline on the day of the murder, which turns them right back to Thomas.
You know that you come in for a polygraph?
I'm more than happy to open it up, prove wrong against your evidence, whatever. Because I have nothing to hide, I have nothing to lie about.
A day or two later, I get a call from one of the local attorneys. He was just like, hey, look, Thomas, he's not going to submit to a polygraph.
I believe it was verified that he was at home some of the time and at work. There were no gaps in his day.
With Thomas and Ramos lawyered up and refusing to then, 11 days after Ursula's murder, detectives receive a call from Ursula's aunt and uncle, Bob and Elizabeth Fendling.
Ursula's aunt and uncle returned to the house approximately 2 days later, did a thorough inventory of the house and discovered items that were missing that were not initially detected.
Ursula's ATM card and her checkbook and the stuff out of the purse, which led them to get subpoenas on the banks to try and get those records to see if anybody had access to that bank account.
On October 21st, 2004, the bank turns over Ursula's financial records, and the case is blown wide open.
I remember when we got the response from the bank, Detective Norris said, somebody's using her card. Someone had used Ursula's card the day after the murder at a Wells Fargo ATM in Santa Fe. And then we saw that the card was used again in Tucumcari, New Mexico, which is to the east of Santa Fe. And then the records continued, showing that it was used out in Texas, like Arkansas, and at various ATMs withdrawing money until Ursula's $2,000 was eventually drained and the account was empty upon a last withdrawal somewhere in Louisiana.
We obtained the search warrants necessary to gather the information and received an ATM photo of the individual that had utilized Ursula's card.
On October 25th, 2004, investigators receive the much-anticipated ATM surveillance.
So, we're all kind of excited, is going to show us who did this. So Detective Norris, he sits down at his computer and he put it in.
The image captured on the screen is a big break, but not the one they anticipated.
I looked down kind of at Dean and I was like, what is this? And he was like, I don't know.
One thing is certain. It is not Thomas Lujan or Ramos Baldonado.
The first video that pops up is a woman who appeared to be in her mid to late 50s, wearing a blue Parker, dark sunglasses, and gloves, using the ATM. Now I'm like, who the hell is this?
Coming up, the case leads detectives away from jilted lovers and onto the trail of a total stranger.
We found bags.
Had the training to do it.
And the investigation takes a sharp turn with a Hollywood twist.
The police found some screenplays that she had written in the storage unit, one of which was titled Deadly Than Murder.
On October 25th, 2004, 13 days after Ursula Duran was found shot to death, investigators now have security footage of someone using Ursula's bank card at an ATM. What the image reveals is the complete opposite of the two men detectives believed were involved.
Upon viewing that image, I remember Billy and I were shocked as to who is this. It was of what appeared to be an elderly white female, which surprised us. We had no indication of any elderly white females that were pertinent in Ursula's life at that point in time.
My first initial thought was maybe the timestamp on the video didn't match up with the ATM usage. It was out of sync or something, and I was getting some other person. So Dean, he clicks on the next video, and she pulls up in a silver car, a Saturn SC2. It's the same woman. Well, that ain't a coincidence. This is two different locations on two different days.
Detectives know Ursula's mother has suffered enough and are hesitant to follow up with more questions.
I mean, it's just so sad. I think of her mom and, how I just felt so bad for her. Not only, was the daughter taken, but she found the body, and it was so senseless.
And that's when a determination was made to speak with the aunt and uncle to see if possibly they knew who the individual in the image was.
So I put on the video, and the Findlings are watching it, and Elizabeth Findling does one of these. That looks like Karen Smallwood. My reaction was, who is Karen Smallwood? And she goes, Karen Smallwood. She used to house sit for us.
According to Ursula's aunt and uncle, they met Karen years earlier.
Together for a short time at Children, Youth, and Families. And Karen had got down on her luck a little bit and asked to house sit when they went out of town for a couple of weeks. But when they came back, she continued to stay with them for a couple of more weeks. And Karen was just rude and nasty, and the Findlings decided we're never going to ask her to do this again.
Years passed, and the Findlings had heard the last of Karen Smallwood. Or so they thought.
Karen had recently, within the previous month or so, called them saying, hey, do you guys need a house sitter? The Findlings explained to her that their niece, Ursula, was going to house sit for them. We're like, do you know where she is? And she didn't know. But she did say that Karen had been staying for a while at a local campground, just on the outskirts of the city. And she says, isn't that dangerous? It's not safe. And Karen told her, no, I bought a gun for protection.
Investigators were sent to that location to see if they could obtain more information for us.
The employees of the campground were shown photos and confirmed that that was Karen Smallwood and that she was driving that Saturn SC2.
According to employees, Karen had been a guest of the campground over the years and last checked in a few months earlier.
She had been kicked out of the KOA in mid-September for disruptive behavior. So they started to get this picture of this distinctly unsavory, sort of mean drifter that was apparently just living out of her car somewhere around Santa Fe.
Employees say Karen was known to keep most of her belongings at a local storage facility. While authorities work to find that unit, Detectives Johnson and Norris run a background check on Karen. The only blemish she has on her record is a previous traffic citation.
We found documentation in there showing that Karen Smallwood had a master's degree in sociology. We found discharge papers from the United States Army from the 1970s showing that she was a retired first lieutenant, United States Army.
And while investigators can find no family history, the number Karen had given the Findlings leads to a former roommate of Karen's named Shelley Maury Sloan.
They said, "You know this woman?" And I was like, "Ooh, yeah, I know her. She stayed in my house for 5 days. I don't like her. She owes me money. No, I kicked her out of my house." And they wouldn't tell me what she did, but they said, "We advise you to change the locks on your door." And I said, "Whoa, now that's scaring me."
According to Shelley, she had opened up her home to Karen just a month earlier.
She said she needed a place to rent. My impression right away that she was in a bad situation. I don't remember now if she said she was between jobs or exactly what her work situation was at that point. But she did clearly say she didn't have the money.
Shelley explains it wasn't just Karen's lack of funds that ended her short stay.
I just didn't like her energy when I came into my house. It just felt very strange.
Shelley points detectives to another former roommate that had serious reservations about Karen.
She always seemed like she had a chip on her shoulder, that she was a little bit hostile. Every time she parked next to me in the parking lot of right in front of our house, she would hit my car with her car door. She just had a sort of passive-aggressive quality to her that made me nervous. I kind of started to feel like she had this darkness to her, which is why, in the end, after a year, I asked her to leave.
It's a disturbing pattern of behavior, and it's about to get even more alarming when detectives locate Karen's storage unit.
They found a lot of Miss Smallwood's personal items. The police found some screenplays that Miss Smallwood had written in the storage unit, one of which was titled More Deadly Than Murder.
We found radio telecommunications license. She had a pilot's license. We also found bags of spent shell casings, bags of spent projectiles, and we had 9mm casings and projectiles, I think 38s, 357s. So, that seemed promising because we knew the projectiles recovered from Ursula's body were 9mm.
So when they searched the storage unit, they found some papers that showed that Miss Smallwood had a sister. Police contacted the local law enforcement where she was, and they spoke with her sister. Her sister informed the police that Miss Smallwood was with another relative in Florida, and she was able to give the police the name of the person she was with and the town in Florida where Miss Smallwood.
Evidence to arrest Karen for Ursula's murder. So they do the next best thing.
We had obtained an arrest warrant for Miss Smallwood for unlawful use of a credit card.
So I put a call into the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and I said, hey guys, this is what I got. Any chance you could help me out? I get a phone call from one of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement special agents, and he says, hey, we found your car. And we've got Karen Smallwood. She's in custody.
Coming up, investigators travel cross-country on a quest for answers. But will it bring them any closer to justice?
As soon as she saw us, she immediately became angry.
She would not speak with them about anything.
To not accept responsibility for what she did is unconscionable to me.
Karen Smallwood is being held in the Seminole County Correctional Facility, charged with the fraudulent use of 19-year-old murder victim Ursula Duran's bank card.
The hope was that Miss Smallwood would actually speak with us and tell us why this happened, whether Miss Smallwood, was caught burglarizing the aunts and uncle's house. We needed to know what the series of events were that led to Ursula being killed.
As soon as she saw us, she immediately became angry and rude, and she was like, I am not saying anything to you guys.
Yeah, but I want a lawyer before I talk to anybody.
You want a lawyer?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, and I refuse to talk to you any further than that, period.
Investigators press forward with or without Karen's cooperation.
We obtained search warrants for Miss Smallwood herself to obtain DNA evidence, hair follicles, oral swabs, fingerprints.
Detectives also execute a search warrant on Karen's vehicle.
We found $800 in 20s. Well, what do you get out of ATM machines? 20s.
Detective Johnson found what's known as a fanny pack underneath the front seat of Miss Smallwood's vehicle.
26 9mm pistol staring me in the face with fully loaded magazines of 9mm rounds. And I was like, oh yeah.
On November 8th, 2004, the ballistics results reach investigators, along with two new critical findings.
We had a ballistics match to the projectiles and casings at the scene, and there was blood inside that pistol that the DNA matched back to Ursula Durand.
It was determined that the hair follicles that were discovered in Ursula's hands were a match to Miss Smallwood.
Karen Smallwood is extradited back to New Mexico, where she is charged with the murder of Ursula Durand. By then, detectives believe they know what transpired on that fateful fall afternoon in 2004, and it had nothing to do with Ramos Baldonado or Thomas Lujan.
The evidence points to Ursula Durand being in the wrong place at the wrong time when she encountered Karen Smallwood.
I believe Miss Smallwood was surprised by Ursula. I believe that Miss Smallwood did not want to be identified as a burglar of the residence and reacted out of emotion.
There was a confrontation. It was clear that she had a bad temper and that she just lost it. And I mean, she had clearly thought about murder before she had written an entire screenplay about it.
A scuffle had ensued between Miss Smallwood and Miss Durand. She was shot by Miss Smallwood and fell to the floor.
Karen had to walk up, kneel next to her, given the distance and the angle, and execute her. 2 shots to make sure. That's cold.
what she did to Ursula have the hallmarks of a deranged, cold-blooded killer. She was never diagnosed regarding her mental state, but that someone could break into a home, kill a complete stranger in cold blood like this, take deliberate steps to try to cover her tracks, those are the actions of a person who deliberately killed and had no compunction about doing what she did.
Karen Smallwood's arrest for Ursula Duran's murder was a huge relief. What she did is unconscionable to me.
Thomas and Ramos are cleared from any involvement in the murder of Ursula Duran. As for the flowers found at the crime scene, they remain a mystery.
Why were there a bouquet of pink roses at the foot of the driveway? I don't know. Maybe somebody passerby. Maybe they were from an earlier time. I don't think we ever found out where those roses came from.
On January 11th, 2008, Karen Smallwood forgoes a trial and enters a no-contest plea.
By pleading no contest, Karen Smallwood is admitting that the state has sufficient evidence to convict her, even though she refused to state that she was the one who killed Ursula Duran. The defendant must serve at least 30 years in prison before even being eligible to seek parole.
The Durans received closure for their daughter's death. The young boy's going to grow up without his mother and will never receive justification for what happened to his mother.
We haven't finished living the tragedy. I want people to know that she was an exceptional human being with great potential, and the sadness of this was that potential was cut off.
I think we should remember Ursula as the fighting spirit she was, and the joy she brought to everyone's life. I had never met someone so compassionate and genuine. And she was willing to sacrifice for me so I would succeed as well.